A decade later, in 2006, a full-length Chakma narrative film, Dulukumuri, which tells an indigenous folktale, was released. It was the first film to be scripted, produced, directed, and acted by indigenous peoples of the CHT. In the 12 years from 2006 to 2018, CHT indigenous filmmakers have made over 50 films in the Chakma, Marma, Tripura, Tonchunga, Bengali, and English languages. These films include short experimental, social, or cultural or ecological films, full-length activist documentaries, and short to full-length feature films of various genres. The films vary in their quality and attitude to their subject matter. There is no unity in the representation of the CHT or the construction of the subjectivity of the film's characters. The themes range from the rural to the urban, and the stories from the factional to the factual. The films are, in short, as heterogeneous as the indigenous peoples themselves. Without the support of the state or cinema philanthropist, most CHT films are non-budget films in which all actors and technicians work with no or minimum remuneration. CHT cinema is also a non-profit cinema, mostly made and consumed in the CHT. These films have nevertheless attracted national and international audiences, and some have succeeded at local, national, and international film festivals. In 1990, Maori filmmaker and cinema critic Barry Barclay introduced the term Indigenous Cinema, in which indigenous is indexed with a capital I. Placing indigenous cinema in the broader cinema discourse, Barclay suggested indigenous cinema was a fourth cinema, adding to Fernando Solana's and Octavio Gaetano's framework of first, second, and third cinemas. First cinema refers to Hollywood cinema. Second cinema refers to the form of European art cinema that rejects Hollywood conventions. And third cinema refers to cinema from the post-colonial world, such as the author's home region of Latin America, that accommodates the particular cultural thinking pattern of the colonized, projected through the eyes of the repressed. Barry saw fourth cinema as having an ideology that does not necessarily conform to the modern nation-state's cultural goals and aspirations. Barclay's fourth cinema thus relates to the older term fourth world, coined in the late 20th century as part of the emergence of collective international indigenous activism that also occurred in the CHT. By far the most ambitious CHT film to date, Ong Rakhan's 2014 masterpiece, Mothengari, demonstrates the key features of Barclay's conception of indigenous or fourth cinema. Mothengari is the first mainstream Chakma language film. It was scripted and directed by Ong Rakhan, an indigenous filmmaker from Cox's Bazar, a district adjacent to the CHT. Mothengari premiered in 2014 at Dhaka's 13th International Short and Independent Film Festival. It has been shown in about 20 international film festivals. Screened under the main category competition, it secured the Best Screenplay Award at the 2015 Silver Agbuzat International Festival of National and Ethnic Films. Can I go back to that slide? Okay. Mothengari tells the story of an unemployed indigenous CHT youth, Kabita Chakma, whose life revolves around his much-loved bicycle. After failing to find a job in the city, Kamal returns home with his bicycle, which is a novelty in his remote village. He hits upon the idea of earning an income by ferrying people and goods with his bicycle. But his entrepreneurial endeavors with his bicycle are disrupted by run-ins with both the powerful locals in the village and encounters with the Bangladesh military who occupy the CHT. Eventually, Kamal's bicycle is stolen and he finds it discarded and damaged. The wrecked bicycle, perhaps a metaphor for his shattered dreams. In a final scene, Kamal is shown leaving the CHT just as he arrived, a passenger sitting with his now broken bicycle in a small one-oared boat on the Kaptai Lake. The one-oared boats that pass by him from the opposite direction carry even more contemporary technologies than his beloved bicycle. One carries a motorcycle, another carries a television set. The film sets the mundane details of the struggle of everyday life in the CHT against a changing cultural and technological landscape and the unsettling backdrop of violence. However, here the primary threat is from the criminal activity of fellow indigenous villagers rather than the security forces. While the presence of the military is menacingly alluded to, only rarely are they actually encountered. Mothengari demonstrates Baxley's conception of an indigenous cinema that presents perspectives beyond those of the cinema of modern nation-states. Cinema scholar Zakir Hussain Raju describes mainstream Bangladeshi cinema as Bengali Muslim cinema. Mainstream Bangladeshi cinema does not contest the national narrative enshrined in the constitution that Bangladesh has only one people, one language, and one culture. Mothengari, as a non-Bangla, Chakma language Bangladeshi film, disturbs this narrative of homogeneity. The film tells a Bangladeshi story in which the concern of its indigenous peoples are central. In other words, indigenous people are no longer exotic others whose role is to reinforce the normalcy of a unitary Bengali culture. Nor is it an indigenous story told from a Bengali perspective. Rather than exotic Paharis, villainous Paharis, or Paharis aspiring to achieve a Bengali identity, the film reveals ordinary indigenous peoples with ordinary lives who are good and bad and have dreams and frustrations. Technology intervenes in the life of these indigenous peoples just as it intervenes in everyone's life. Whether it is the imposition of the Kaptai hydroelectric dam or the introduction of a bicycle, everyday lives are affected and change. The film frees us from the romantic assumption that authentic indigenous life should be static, stuck in some imagined exotic past. Regardless of Mothengari's international successes, the film has not yet had commercial release in Bangladesh. The Bangladesh Censor Board has so far refused permission for it to be shown in any national cinema theatre in Bangladesh because of a claim that it contains scenes and dialogue detrimental to the Bangladesh government and security force. Jolene Ricard, a Tuscarora scholar, artist, and curator, coined the term visual sovereignty in 1995. Since then, it has gained currency in the study of indigenous art and cinema. In a 2011 article, Ricard examined sovereignty as a visual or aesthetic issue in the context of North American indigenous peoples' artworks and films which go beyond the Western legalistic notion of sovereignty. With the emergence over the last 2 decades of indigenous CHT films, the indigenous people of the CHT are beginning to exert sovereignty over their own representation. Rather than accepting the reductive constructions imposed by others, they are constructing their own diverse and complex subjectivity through films. These films are not simply a reminder to themselves that they are not misfit on the margin of another culture. A reminder that Mathin from the film Megher Onek Rong now has the capacity to resist against any imposed identity. This film also stands as a reminder to everyone that Bangladesh is constituted by a rich diversity that deserves to be celebrated. To end my presentation, I would like to read a 1995 poem, Pahari Nach, meaning hill dance, by an intellectual of the global south, a Bengali Bangladeshi poet, Maruf Raihan. I have attempted to translate the poem into English for our global audience at the Dhaka Art Summit. The poem highlights the paradox inherent in the cultural displays of our Pahari dancers, where the beauty of the dance conceals the violence of the dancer's homeland. Hill dance. The dance of a hill woman in a Shonargaon festival impresses the audience of the plains. Shopna Marma is her name. One could easily spot her among the troop. Her culture, particularly Jung cultivation in her gesture, is skillfully expressed in her dance. Her body is as if molded for dancing. A representative, she travels far beyond SAARC countries, impressing audiences, pouring wine to quench artistic thirst. Watching her dance, one would think there are no tigers, no hyenas in her hills, no arson of homes, and the sky is blue. The Pahari woman ferries dreams from country to country, leaving behind the hill-high score of violence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kabita, for that very wonderful and powerful presentation. Now is the time if anybody would like to make some comments or ask some questions.
Thank you.
I'm very curious, Kabita, because it was a very fascinating presentation, especially regarding the role that you give to technology somehow to as a means of finding another space for be vocal, but also to find a space of entry in other spaces of repression. And I wonder if you could say something more, because your research doesn't only is not only in the specificity of the cinema medium. If you could say something more about the role that technology can play in those kind of processes of gaining a voice.
Can you please repeat the last bit? Thank you, Anthony.
Since your your interest spans so much larger than simply cinema, and I wonder if you can say something more about the role that technology can play somehow, or it plays nowadays in those systems of heavy repression.
Communicate directly to the populations, not only of the sort of the main people of the countries where we live in, but also to the international audiences. And in Sami filmmaking, we have like 2 examples of that the cinematic language then reaches out. And the first one is Pathfinder, that was produced in 1986 and ended up getting a nomination for the Oscar Awards. And that was a Norwegian, a Sami on the Norwegian side, Mr. Nils Gaub, who directed that film. And then it has been a dry season that has lasted for a long time, but now we have one Sami from the Swedish side. And we have a movie that is called Sami Blood. And the thing with that movie is that at the first place the Nordic gatekeepers were pretty restrictive. It didn't make it to the Tromsø Film Festival when it was launched. And the Swedish cinema board who decided where to screen movies had given that film a very restricted access, and the movie then ended up getting a lot of international prizes from this festival, from that festival, from this festival, from that festival, and also got the EU prize, and just a week ago or so got some very prestigious prizes from the Swedish film industry that finally saw it. But the lesson learned there is that how do the gatekeepers control the initial gates for whether a film gets out. So how is it with these films? Have they had, what is the reach that they got? Is it the national level, international level? Have they been on festivals around?
It was premiered in... But there is no regulation. You can show in international or any film festival. That's with no money, kind of. So commercially, it's really something. Thank you.
Thank you, Kabita. Thank you very much for your great presentation. Just a small piece of supplementary information you could add perhaps regarding the ancestry of Martin. As far as I know, she's also partially of Tripura descent on her mother's side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You know that many Nepalis and Assami people who stayed over since the time of the maybe war with Myanmar or something, long time back, basically soldiers from the British days settled in the CHT and married into local communities. Anyhow, that's a minor point. And just a little bit of anecdote, I mean, I could have been a competition for Chinese character. You probably know my story that once I was offered a role also in Bangladeshi cinema. Somebody who identified himself as the casting director saw me and walked into my hotel room saying, I had long hair back then. Hey, I cast characters, people like Chinese, and you'd look good in roles of Thai smugglers and so on. So it gives you an idea about the stereotyping. And more recently, I did actually end up acting in a sort of a cinema which hasn't been released. But there I played a very, very short role as a school teacher of no specific ethnic identity. But after that, I was actually approached again by somebody in mainstream Bangladeshi TV, and they said, we would like to cast you in the role of an activist, Garo leader, something like that. I declined. But anyway, my question about just, I was wondering about the problem with the release of the film. I haven't had the opportunity to watch it, the Tangari. But do you know, I mean, we know the reason why it's not being released in Bangladesh, it's because the military sort of very indirectly, we saw in the trailer also some boots crashing over toys, probably military boots. Just fleeting references like that is enough. And you know how people don't want to sort of disturb the military's image of themselves. We all know, and everybody is complicit in Bangladesh on that, but most everybody, I should say. But I remember reading on social media, I haven't researched the topic myself, the technical argument given by the censor board was that it is a Chakma language film. Not because they say the military is represented in a bad light, but a Chakma language film, and they are only authorized to maybe screen films that are in Bengali, something like that. That too says a lot, but not exactly the same argument. Anyhow.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Actually, I'm really. It's refreshing my memory because I know Martin. She actually taught me how to dance, but I'm a failure. Sorry. And yes, I remember her mother. She is a Tripura woman, but I couldn't remember because I was really young at the time in primary school. So yeah, thank you. That's a very important information in the mother's ancestry. And the thing is, okay, we missed you to see you as a smuggler. It's a bad luck, everybody. And the technical point you brought up is actually not true. I have checked the rules of, the cinema of Bangladesh. I think there is nothing, no constraint, no restriction for other languages. There is nothing actually. It's not said that in other languages, language film can't be shown or anything. But because of that actually article, I have also read the article which actually argued because it's in Chakma language, that's why it's not being released. But it's not true. There's lots of media interest and with, yes, and some stories too, but that's not true, the language one. Yeah, thank you.
I think I can speak loudly.
No, it's...
Oh, you're right, okay. One question, any idea about how much it cost to make that film? Or he had a budget or something like that? Just to get an idea about how much it cost to make a film like that.
This is a zero budget film, okay? Zero budget film is kind of what director do with the minimum resource and minimum technician and minimum technical expertise, try to get the best achievement, best quality film, okay? So it actually took him 10 years to do the film. And with that, it came like 60 to 70 lakhs.
To make it?
Yes. And it's actually because he has minimized everything, stage and prepared everything beforehand. So it's just the one shot, that's it. And made sure that this is perfect. Okay. So that's how.
A follow-up question from that is that if, say, for example, he's not going to get any money out of commercial viewing and all, right? So the other option was to sort of make it easily available for everybody to see because he's not going to recoup his money anyway. So I guess the next question is that why does anybody has to go through that particular
censor board?
No, not so much censor board. You said that you could only access it and view it once through a European
website, yeah.
Right. So I guess, I'm trying to understand and all that, why isn't it available for everybody to view? Because he's already spent the money, he's not going to get anything back out of it. Rather, and at least let people see it, what he has created. An artist would obviously want somebody to see his art.
I think it's his decision, actually.
Yeah.
You have to respect,
It's
he might be, hoping that someday there will be a release because there is lots of interest from Bangladesh communities and from all sector. So hopefully it will the censor board will think, okay, we can release a film. And also that that fleeting reference that Prashanto has mentioned, it's actually not even military boot, it's it's not even proper military thing. So it's actually opens to other interpretations as well. It could be military or other kind of, terrorist sort of thing. So it's open to interpretation, and usually the viewer who thinks that it's us, they take it that way.
We'll wish him all the best.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for that presentation. It was beautiful. I suppose just two questions. My first question is just on the back of that question. Are there underground screenings, or do these films make their way through other means into communities in order for them to be seen? And do these films get discussed in language or in communities in Bangladesh? And my third kind of question on the back of that is, given this context, are the films discussed here, and is it a problem today that we're speaking about it in English, when this is a Chakma film and it's a film for, it's a film made in Bangladesh? Do you think it's a problem that we're having this discussion in the language that is not the language of origin?
Complicated questions, Alexis. I love you for that. The first thing is, I lost your question, sorry.
My first one was just, are there underground screenings?
Okay, yeah. And the second one?
Are these films discussed in kind of groups or in meetings by communities who are either Indigenous communities or more broadly city communities? And then my third question is it problematic that in this film
Language.
that we're speaking about this in English?
For underground screening, I'm not quite sure what is underground screening anyway, but
Like in places where films get censored, often people will do screenings for communities
no,
in places.
no, it has not been released. He has been actually strictly following government's order. So there are only, I think 3 trailers has been done, so that's it. And shown in international film festivals, it has been shown in Dhaka, in this library, actually, Dhaka University Library. And also other international, film festival, if they wish, they can, I think, talk and negotiate and have a go and kind of thing. But most of the people actually, I mean, the mass hasn't seen it. Only mostly, the cinema, who is interested in cinema, who goes to international film festivals, those are the people who watched it. And intonation of an educated Bengali elite. She reads Time magazine. The reporter between her and her husband is vibrant, and neither is portrayed as subordinate to the other. However, from an indigenous perspective, some issues in the film are problematic. The reporter between her and the film raises questions about who should belong to the new nation. Pahari's allegiance to the state is brought into doubt. In one episode, Nurse Mathin, who is caring for wounded freedom fighters and is clearly committed to the new nation, explains why she would fight for her country. Dr. Omar then questions her allegiance in his retort, quote, "Is this fight for freedom yours too?" End quote. He emphasizes his point by claiming that she uses borrowed ideas, indicating that non-Bengalis do not have genuine reason to fight for the new nation. This cinema representation of the denial of Pahari's contribution to Bangladesh's independence resonate with national narratives, which generally exclude CHT indigenous peoples' contributions and sacrifices in the war. When Dr. Omar questions her allegiance, she declares, quote, "You do not want to accept us as Bengalis, but I belong to this land," end quote. This dialogue might be interpreted as Mathin, a Pahari woman who has acquired almost everything, education, affluence, Western affectation, seeking the final step in her rise above her Pahari status to be accepted as a Bengali. This interpretation is reinforced by calls made by high-level political leaders of that time for Paharis to abandon their own cultures and be integrated into Bengali culture. At a 1972 meeting, the CHT's Member of Parliament, Manobendra Narayan Larma, and the founding leader and Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman counseled Larma with the words, "Tora shob Bangali hoya ja, you should all become Bengalis." Apart from the short-lived career of Mathin, the only sustained professional indigenous actor in Bangladesh cinema, is the most recent CHT actor Chittagong Chakma, who goes by the stage name Chinese. Chinese's usual role is as supporting cast in Bengali action movies. As a martial art black belt holder, he has been the fight director for many action films. Since his first appearance in 1984, he has worked on about 400 films. In all these films, his own identity as a Pahari and indigenous person is of little consequence. His roles have generally been nefarious as a smuggler, a foreigner, or a villain's accomplice. Mahtab Hossain, an entertainment reporter, thus introduced Chittagong Chakma as the Chinese villain of the Bengali cinema. In the national cinema imagination, indigenous subjectivity has thus been constructed in various reductionist ways, as subordinates in relation to Bengalis, as exotic others, as villains, or at best educated Paharis aspiring to be Bengalis. The last 2 decades has seen the emergence of indigenous filmmakers who have begun telling their own stories through film. In 1996, a Chakma language stage drama, Andalut For, written and directed by Kabita Chakma, was remade with cooperation from the Aranyok Natyodol of Dhaka to become the first CHT film to be shot outdoors. A decade later, in 2006, a full-length Chakma narrative film, Dulukhmuri, which tells an indigenous folktale, was released. It was the first film to be scripted, produced, directed, and acted by indigenous peoples of the CHT. In the 12 years from 2006 to 2018, CHT indigenous filmmakers have made over 50 films in the Chakma, Marma, Tripura, Tonchunga, Bengali, and English languages. These films include short experimental, social, or cultural or ecological films, full-length activist documentaries, and short to full-length feature films of various genres. The films vary in their quality and attitude to their subject matter. There is no unity in the representation of the CHT or the construction of the subjectivity of the film's characters. The themes range from the rural to the urban, and the stories from the factional to the factual. The films are, in short, as heterogeneous as the indigenous peoples themselves. Without the support of the state or cinema philanthropist, most CHT films are non-budget films in which all actors and technicians work with no or minimum remuneration. CHT cinema is also a non-profit cinema. Mostly made and consumed in the CHT, these films have nevertheless attracted national and international audiences, and some have succeeded at local, national, and international film festivals. In 1990, Maori filmmaker and cinema critic Barry Barclay introduced the term indigenous cinema, in which indigenous is indexed with a capital I. Placing indigenous cinema in the broader cinema discourse, Barclay suggested indigenous cinema was a fourth cinema, adding to Fernando Solana's and Octavio Gaetano's framework of first, second, and third cinemas. First cinema refers to Hollywood cinema. Second cinema refers to the form of European art cinema that rejects Hollywood conventions. And third cinema refers to cinema from the post-colonial world, such as the author's home region of Latin America, that accommodates the particular cultural thinking pattern of the colonized, projected through the eyes of the repressed. Barry saw fourth cinema as having an ideology that does not necessarily conform to the modern nation-state's cultural goals and aspirations. Berkeley's fourth cinema thus relates to the older term fourth world, coined in the late 20th century as part of the emergence of collective international indigenous activism that also occurred in the CHT. By far the most ambitious CHT film to date, Aung Rakhain's 2014 masterpiece, Mothengari, demonstrates the key features of Berkeley's conception of indigenous or fourth cinema. Mothengari is the first mainstream Chakma language film. It was scripted and directed by Aung Rakhain, an indigenous filmmaker from Cox's Bazar, a district adjacent to the CHT. Mothengari premiered in 2014 at Dhaka's 13th International Short and Independent Film Festival. It has been shown in about 20 international film festivals. Screened under the main category competition, it secured the Best Screenplay Award at the 2015 Silver Agbuzat International Festival of National and Ethnic Films. Just make the speaker.
It's just not on the screen.
Okay. Sorry. So it changes the life of everybody, you know. That's the thing, and we are enframed in technology, as Martin Heidegger said. So we can't get out of it, neither indigenous, non-indigenous, or anyone. So somehow it comes to our life, and somehow there is an assumption that indigenous people, you know, like they're backward, they can't take. You know, cope with technology, but it's not true. You know, this the adaptation of these people is huge. When just for example, when this 1960s, you know, Kaptai hydroelectric dam, it submerged everything. You know, they lost everything, but again they actually stood up. You know, I use that artwork, you know, flying, there's a recuperation and giving strength, and you know, and we are here, we are kind of, we haven't lost our identity, you know, we are trying to, you know, recreate our identity. We're using technology, and similarly with the cinema, you know, there is it's such a fragile, you know, entity, CHT cinema. There is nothing, you know, like, but it's. I must mention the film, like I couldn't show anyway. There's a recent documentary film on CHT directors, like just a documentary, and they were asked, you know, you don't gain anything. Why do you make cinema? You actually lose. So, but they said this is actually our identity. That's it. It's cinema for identity, the name of the documentary. So I will, ask you to, Google. Probably it will come up, I think. And yes, so also technology has broke the barrier. Like we don't have this for the cinema is a very complex process. It's not only making, also distribution and reaching the audience. It's if you can't reach the audience, the cinema is like nothing. But now this new platform, technological platform like YouTube, it breaks the barrier, so you can actually reach beyond political boundary or anything. So yes, technology. So thank you. I hope I could answer your question.
Thank you so much for the very beautiful and inspiring presentation. I was thinking that humanity is in that situation that the closest we get to a universal language is actually the cinematic language. And that gives some possibilities to indigenous peoples to communicate directly to the populations, not only of the sort of the main people of the countries where we live in, but also to the international audiences. And in Sami filmmaking, we have like 2 examples of that the cinematic language then reaches out. And the first one is Pathfinder, that was produced in 1986 and ended up getting a nomination for the Oscar
That's right.
Awards. And that was a Sami on the Norwegian side, Mr. Nils Gaub, who directed that film. And then it has been a dry season that has lasted for a long time, but now we have one Sami from the Swedish side. And we have a movie that is called Sami Blood.
Yes.
And the thing with that movie is that at the first place the Nordic gatekeepers were pretty restrictive. It didn't make it to the Tromsø Film Festival when it was launched. And the Swedish cinema board who decided where to screen movies had given that film a very restricted access. And the movie then ended up getting a lot of international prizes from this festival, from that festival, from this festival, from that festival, and also got a EU prize, and just a week ago or so got some very prestigious prizes from the Swedish film industry that finally saw it. But the lesson learned there is that how do the gatekeepers control the initial gates for whether a film gets out? So how is it with these films? Have they had, what is the reach that they got? Is it the national level, international level? Have they been on festivals around?
It was premiered in the Dhaka, International Short and Independent Film Festival, and also other festivals. But internationally, it has been to more than 20 international film festivals, and I think it's possible because of the Ong Rakhain. He's a very lucky to have good friends, for distribution. Konatoki is one of it's an organization based in Dhaka and New York. They're the one that Konatoki is distributing the film. So and also this film has been supported by so many the mainstream filmmakers as well. So it has been it's blessing. It's a collaboration, like it was so good. And for his when I asked him, interviewed him about how did he make the film, because he doesn't have money or any support, and he said, okay, like friends gave some money, his wife sold her gold jewelry, and actually more than about, I think, 60% of the fund came from Bengali friends. So so he could make it. And Professor, your other question is
the other was about the gatekeepers, the behavior of the gatekeepers that control the initial gates.
Yeah. Yes, it is not possible to show in any Bangladesh commercial cinema theater. So there is a regulation, that's the censor board of Bangladesh. Any film has to go through that board to be allowed to show in any commercial cinema theater. So this film, what happened that it was given to the cinema, censor board, and he actually initially got a date to be they will be seeing it and give yes or no. But then there was a complaint from some military officer, some colonel, just saying that this cinema has got this kind of detrimental dialogues. So on that issue, they have actually cancelled the viewing, and since then he hasn't got any viewing date, so it's just locked. So there is a big interest from this Bangladesh audiences to see the film, and internationally, and I think it is one of the film that it is so much it got a lot of media attention from the mainstream media, and we don't know what will happen, what is the fate of it. I have seen the film because I have actually there is you can subscribe it for a month from an European organization, and through which you can see any film in the international festival. So, but one show only. So it was very precious. I had to see it with my whole concentration. So because it's just one chance. Yes, and there are trailers. I have shown the trailers, and it's you can show it to the international film festival. You don't need censor board's permission, but there was actually objection to why it was shown in the international.
It's our fourth day of discussions of sovereign words. We have various very exciting, wonderful speakers today. We will start with Kabita Chakma, who will be followed by Prashanta Tripura. We will have a little coffee break. Then Byung-Isma Hassan will speak, followed by Hannah Donnelly, and we will finish with Mikhail Tudu. So without further ado, I'd like to ask you all to give us a warm welcome for Kabita Chakma, please.
Thank you, Ju. It's a great pleasure for me to be at the Dhaka Art Summit. I thank DAS, OCA, Art Space, Australia Council for the Arts, Bangladesh Shilpakala Academy, Samdani Art Foundations, and all working here. Dhaka is a home for me. It is where I lived for most of my senior student life. I was born in an internally displaced family in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, which is also shortly known as the CHT. The CHT is the hilly, forested area of southeast Bangladesh. My family had been displaced by the construction of the Kaptai hydroelectric dam. 1/3 of the indigenous population of the CHT lost their homes and livelihoods to this imposed technology. I have witnessed militarization of the CHT and the transmigration of at least 300,000 plainland Bengalis that has entirely changed the demographic of the CHT. This is an artwork award-winning series of artworks by Kabita Chakma. It shows our community's identity through suffering, survival, and strength, using cartography of the CHT to capture the displacement by structural violences of colonialization, technologization, militarization, tourism, and transmigration. Day before yesterday, my friend Santosh Tripura gave a historical overview of the CHT, and Albert Soren on plainland of Bangladesh, highlighting many of these issues. Some art panels show maps of Bangladesh, highlighting the militarized CHT. Some art panels are juxtaposed with striking, faceless flying human figures and traditional artifacts. There is a texture of water droplets, teardrops on most panels. The flight of the human figures and traditional objects over a cartographic landscape signify CHT communities' continued recuperation from the imposed structural violence and fight for justice. According to Alok Roy, an eminent Bangladeshi sculptor, artist, and academic, I quote, "This series of artworks go to the core of indigenous life and suffering, but are not sentimental or mere illustration," end quote. Resistance to structural violence of CHT indigenous peoples has perpetuated in the work of Kabita Chakma, Joydev Ruaja, and collective Hill artist groups' work in this summit's exhibition, and perpetuated in many arenas of CHT's cultural work, and recently through cinema. In this presentation, I want to examine the emergence of an indigenous cinema in the CHT and map indigenous peoples' increasing control over their own representation. The East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, Film Development Corporation was established in 1957. From the very beginning, the CHT was used as a site of cinema production. Filmmakers used the CHT for two reasons. First, its a unique landscape of hills and forest contrasts most of Bangladesh's vast deltaic plainland. And second, the 1960s construction of the Kaptai hydroelectric dam had created an exotic landscape of serene water interspersed with islands. The Kaptai hydroelectric project was a major technological feat and a signifier of the state's entry into modernity. Important state guests were given tours to the facility. The film Bangladesh I Love You documented the 1978 visit of the world heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali to the Kaptai project in the CHT. In this newly achieved modernity, Bengali narrative films constructed the CHT and its indigenous inhabitants as exotic, often backward others. Filmmakers homogenized the diverse indigenous people of the CHT into one single identity, Pahari, meaning hill people. The depiction of these indigenous peoples were fanciful amalgamation of anything that seemed exotic, not just from Bangladesh, but from anywhere from the world. These early films provide little or no significant insight into issues of consequences to the CHT, and take the CHT and its indigenous people as simply an exotic backdrop as scenography. The 1976 box office hit Jokhon Riccitiello fits this scenographic treatment. A large portion was shot in the CHT. The main female character, portrayed as a Pahari beauty, was played by Bengali actor Olivia Gomez. She was attired in exotic costumes that had no connection to any cultural group in the CHT. The Pahari beauty falls in love with the visiting Dhaka Bengali elite, played by the actor Wasim. The Pahari beauty and her father, who addresses the visitor with the formal epithet Babu, are rendered inferior to their Bengali counterparts. The depiction of Paharis as subordinate is a continued theme in Bangladeshi cinema and television and is commonly constructed around the hegemonic Bengali Babu character. One exception to the scenographic treatment of the CHT and its inhabitants is Harun Rashid's 1976 classic, Meghir Onek Rong. It won 5 national awards. It is perhaps the only significant commercially released narrative film directed by a non-indigenous filmmaker that attempts to take seriously the portrayal of the CHT and its Paharis. The film depicts Dr. Omar, a Bengali physician, along with his wife Ruma and young child Adnan, who were caught up in the violence of the 1971 War of Independence from Pakistan. In the turmoil, Omar becomes separated from his wife and child. His wife Ruma is gang raped by Pakistani soldiers and left for dead with her child. The doctor believes his family had been killed and begins a new married life in the CHT with a Pahari named Mathin. Ruma, who is psychologically scarred, unwittingly moves with her son to the CHT for rehabilitation. Ruma recognizes her doctor husband when he visits the rehabilitation center, but because of the shame of being raped, she feels she can't face him. She chooses instead to anonymously leave her son with the doctor and his new wife and commit suicide. Unlike other early scenographic Bengali narrative films, Meghir Onek Rong attempts to be authentic to its location, inserting specific scenes of the landscape and traditional life of the CHT, including Jum or Sweden agriculture and the Marma chief Bomang's ceremonial procession to a Buddhist temple. The character of the new wife, Pahari wife, Mathin, is played by a woman from the CHT who took the stage name Mathin. Mathin, whose original name is Rina Sharki, is a CHT woman of Nepali origin. Casting a non-Bengali from the CHT in the leading role was a shift away from using Bengali actors to play Paharis. In the film, the characters of the Paharis are not subordinate or simple, but are treated respectfully. Mathin, who plays a nurse, is presented as modern and sophisticated. She dresses in fashionable Western and Bengali clothing. She speaks Bengali with the... Secondly is that discussed in groups, yes, it is discussed in groups. Actually, in the YouTube, there are some discussions actually there about after it was screened in the International Film Festival, Dhaka, 2014, and many discussion came up, and I have seen a number of discussion, and also in television, and they have television, probably radio. I don't know about radio how much it was discussed, but in television also it was discussed, and also now we have CHT Hill Film Festivals. This is going to be the 4th year of of showing. It's going to start at the end of this month, and it used to be only in Rangamati, that's main district, like the major district. It used to be shown in Rangamati, but this year they're taking it to Khagrachari too, because there are lots of demands to see indigenous films. So the film festival is going, but I'm not sure that they're showing this Mothengari in the because it's also sensitive, because government doesn't want to show it, and this CHT film making and festivals are such a fragile ground. Anytime, I don't think they will take any risk to show anything controversial. It's just the films for fun and kind of thing. Those are shown mostly, and And the language one, yes, it could be problematic in some ways, but it could be not problematic in other ways, because through English we can reach many people, and somehow we are also. But it would have been really good if we could speak in, like the audience and the people we could have, spoken in Chakma, Bangla, and also other languages, even Rakhine, he's a Rakhine film, Rakhine, his ethnicity, even in his language. That would have been wonderful. I'm sure his community would like to know from, like what film he has made. We don't have any Rakhine filmmakers. He's the first one. So, yes, so it's like doubly, have double, two-side, thing, of course. Thanks, Alexis.
Actually, just I want to add some information about this. That is, Morthengar was screened in Rangamati in Second Hill Festival for 3 times. Actually, we fixed it for only 1 time. Then a lot of people came to see this. Then we add more 2 segments in this context. That's why in Rangamati in 2015 maybe, in Second Hill Festival, yes, 2015, because in 2016 we did not organize this. So in 2015, there were 3 screenings of this film, Morthengar in Rangamati, and it was also screened in TSC, Dhaka University TSC, organized by DUFS, Dhaka University Film Society. In the beginning of this film, when actually it was started screening in many festivals here, it was actually independent filmmaking in the idea of that sense, that it's an independent film. So it was not targeted mainly cinema, as far as I know, because in which we call independent cinema, these are made targeted only in the international film festivals and some other independent lines, and it was made on that basis. But later, it creates an opportunity to show in cinema hall, but unfortunately, this is not happening due to some problems in censor board. And the thing is, we screened this in Rangamati, and a lot of people came to see this, and now everybody is asking about to see this. So just I am adding just this news or information. What can you say? Thank you all.
Thank you, Odid. He's a young filmmaker from Chittagong Hill Tracts. I must introduce him too. Thank you.
Kabita, hi. Just a question. Have you observed whether from the other side, which is India, within the Chakma community, is there filmmaking that's going on, and if so, what that may be?
Yes, Pablo. In the Indian side, they are making films too, and actually, Indian government has made 2 Chakma cinemas, financed by the Indian government of film. And apart from that, there are independent filmmakers. They are making films too, and so many films are actually shown in CHT Hill Film Festival from Indian side as well. So there is exchange, and not only that, one of the actor from Chittagong Hill Tracts went to Tripura to act in a film called Tannavi, and that film was shown in the Calcutta Film Festival, just last month or so. So yes, this is happening, and this cultural exchange, like those the actors and the actors are going across the border and filming, doing it. And not only that, from Indian side, there are many language films are coming in, and it's inspiring our side of Chittagong Hill Tracts. So there's Marma films are made, and Tripura films are made. But there are many, number of Tripura films are made quite a long time ago in Indian side. Then it's quite new in our side. So that way, it's the cultural exchange, and the CD technology, and Anton's technology. It's breaking the barrier, and also you too. Thank you.